Okay. Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina al-awwaleen wal-akhirin wa ala alihi al-tayyibin wa ashabihi al-mutatahhirin wa ba'd. So we're going to continue inshallah with our reading of the Risala as our main text for our class, right? Al-Qari, al-Arabi, the Arabic reader. So we've been reading through this text mainly for the purposes of language, grammar, and not specifically to, although not saying we dismiss, but the primary reason is for reading, for grammar, for comprehension, and then secondarily some of the things that actually Ibn Abi Zayd rahimahullah mentions in his work. So as you'll see on the second and third page, there's a section that's highlighted in black. And the reason why I did that is this is actually a short quote from Imam al-Majjaji's work, al-Muhaddab min al-Fiqh al-Maliki, because this section that Ibn Abi Zayd discusses, I felt, even though the main focus is not learning fiqh, it would actually perhaps be a little bit helpful to have a little bit more commentary explaining what's going on there as it relates. In this section, Ibn Abi Zayd will be talking about tahara and wudu and izalat al-najasa. He'll be talking about purification and how to make wudu and cleanliness and so on, and specifically about the removing of impurities. And so I added just this little extra quote in there from Imam al-Majjaji, which is the other text that we have been studying from, at least for those that were in the Maliki class for some time. So that's the predominant text that we were reading there. So I just interjected that there. I also put in some more footnotes in this one. Where possible, I prefer to maybe explain some words that you might not be quite as familiar with. I prefer to at least initially explain them in the footnotes in Arabic, so that, as I said, we begin to learn Arabic in Arabic. That's one of the goals for the course as well. Okay. So I think what we'll do is, like before, kind of trade off paragraph by paragraph, and then I'll give some commentary as needed. So, Bismillah, would you like to lead us off, Reg? if not, if you, yeah. So you can, for instance, read from ma taharat al-ma'i all the way to nahwihima. Okay, so let's go back to the top. ما هنا ما لا يحتمل المعنى نهي أو نفي أو منع. right? This use of the ma here is not the ma of prohibiting. But the ma here يحتمل معنى بالمعنى عن أو عما. It's carrying the meaning as it relates to what something is going to be about. So here, ma taharatul ma'i. So as it relates to, or what we're going to discuss as what? Tahara al-ma, the purification of water. So and في جملتنا طهارة مضاف والماء مضاف إليه. So ما طهارة الماء, right? والثوب, because of the واو before الثوب هذا واو عاطف. So it's gonna يحتمل, right? الحكم المضاف إليه. It's going to carry that rule, right? So المضاف إليه دائما مجرور. It's always going to be with a kasra, right? So ما طهارة الماء والثوب وما هي البقعة. البقعة. ما معنى بقعة؟ بقعة يعني, as I put in the notes, what? قطعة من الأرض تتميز مما حولها. So you might say, well, that didn't help me out. We have بقعة, بقعة, and we said it is a قطعة. What is قطعة as a verb means what? Exactly. Very good. Right. So now we go from that, and then we add the ta'un marbuta. We get here, right? We get qata'a, right? Qata'atun. So qata'a means to cut, and qata'a is that which has been cut off, or like a little piece, right? So yani makan, but it says what? It is not just simply qata'a. It says wa qata'a min al-ard. ما معنى الأرض? You don't have to think hard. The dirt, the earth, the ground, right? So it's a area, a section, or a dirt, but it says تتميزوا. تميز الفعل تميز تميز. الجذر ميم والياء والزي. تميز هذا هو الفعل. That's the verb. بني على الوزن تفعل. So you take الجذر, أنت تأخذ الجذر ميم والياء والزي وتضع على الوزن الصرفي تفعل. What you get is تميز. Have you ever heard of the word ممتاز؟ ممتاز. هذا ممتاز, right? Like جيد جدا, like something really excellent. ممتاز, right? So تميز بمعنى بالإنجليزية to be distinct. Something that is, right? So now let's work with it. It says what? البقعة القطعة من الأرض تتميز مما حولها. حول شو؟ حولها, around it, right? So the buq'a is like a little patch of ground or something that is distinct from the other ground around it, right? Now that can be distinct because of what is on it, مما عنها, أو ما ستفعل فيها, or what you're going to do in it. So if you had like a patch of, you're farming, right, or you're growing something, and over here are daisies, like a little patch of daisies surrounded by grass. This would be a buq'a. But let's say we're outside and there's this huge area of whatever, dirt, earth, but this is where I'm going to pray, right here. So هذا المكان نسمى بقعة. So the spot that I'm going to pray in, مكان الصلاة نسمىها بقعة. We call it a buq'ah. So this is what he's saying, that what? As it relates to the purification of water and the clothes that you will wear. المعنى ثوب بشكل عام بالجملة. Right here, thobe doesn't mean what we're accustomed to, like, oh, I'm wearing a thobe, like a particular garment that is different, like what the three of us have on today. Thobe, depending on its context, can mean that. It can mean like the Arab style thing, or thobe, yani libas. It can just simply mean clothing. So here, the meaning is libas, malabis, just clothes. That's what the meaning is. So, ما طهارة الماء والثوب والبقعة وما يجزي من اللباس في الصلاة. So we're going to discuss purification of water, clothing, and the place where prayer will be performed. وما يجزي من اللباس. And here you can see, just like in English, especially not so much in spoken English, but particularly in written English, which is consistent in many languages, we don't like to repeat the same word over and over. You come up with one word. If you're going to reference it again, you like to sometimes use what? A synonym. So here, he's kind of showing you buq'a, and then he says libas. Right? So it's just stylistically, this is the usloob of kitaba. This is just how it is. If you can, right, use a synonym for something because it's more pleasant, it's also more beneficial to learn more vocabulary. And then, so as it relates to these topics, he uses the word وَمَا يَجْزِي مِنَ اللِّبَاسِ. مَا مَعَنَا جَزَاء. Well, let's see. We have footnote number 2. It says what? You don't have to guess. Right? It says what on number 2? يعني كفى. كفى ما معنى كفى. وكفى بالله شهيدا. Sufficient, enough. So then, we're going to discuss purification of water, clothing, and the place where prayer will be performed, and what suffices min al-libasi fi salah. And what suffices, what do you need to wear for clothing? So not only purification of clothing, but then what clothing do you have to wear? And what's unspoken here is what? The awra, like to cover your body. ما يجزي من اللباس في الصلاة. Okay, تمام. Then he says, المصلى يناجي ربه. يناجي ربه. لماذا ربه? Right? He says, you can say also musalli. I don't know if that's a typo or not. Personally, I would actually say al-musalli because he's saying what? The one that prays. So al-musalli, but it can also be taken as a feminine, as a jama' al-musalla, meaning like those that pray. Right? So al-musalli or al-musalla yunaji رباه. لماذا رباه ومش ربه أو ربه؟ ما هو right. ما هي العلامة الفتحة بالحرف الأخير right في عبارة أو في جملة. Like what is the significance? What's the sign when you have a fatha on this last letter on the letter of the ba and the rab, why is it a fatha versus a dhamma or a kasra? If it were a dhamma, what would be the significance? Then it would be rabbuhu, and the meaning would imply what? If it were a dhamma, he would be doing the action, but it's that's receiving the action. Right. If it were a dhamma, that means that huwa al-fa'al fil jumla. He is the subject of the sentence and he's doing the action. That would mean وَهُوَ قَامَ عَلَى الْفِعْلِ نَاجَى. It would mean he's the one that's doing the action of naja. But we already have a mentioning of who the fa'il is, huwa al-musalli. So that doesn't make any sense. So, okay, no dhamma, right? So no dhamma, not the fa'il. If it were a kasra, then if it were majroor, then this would have to be either قبلها حرف جار أو في حالة جار يعني في إضافة, or it would have to either like one of the particles of possession would have to come before it, or it would have to be part of an إضافة, like a noun-noun conjunction, to put it in a state of being majroor. But the word before it is يعني هذا فعل. يناجي هو فعل, so it's a verb, so that's not حرف جار. And we always said هذا هو الفاعل, this is the subject. So that doesn't work either. So it is not going to be, all right, ليس مع كسرة. It's not going to be with a kasra. Okay, the only other harf we're left with is a فتحة. أو علامة فتحة على الحرف الأخير, right? The sign of the fatha on the last letter in the word being affected by the verb is a sign that that word is the what? بالعربية نسمىها مفعول به, أو بالإنجليزية is the direct object, right? It's gonna receive the action. So ربه هذه الكلمة, it's receiving the action of يناجي, the action of the musalli. Now, ما معنى يناجي؟ يناجي من ناجا. 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 This is going to be بني على فاعل. If I can write today. بني على فاعل. وجذرها, its root is going to be نون وجيم وياء أو ألف مكسورة. So its root is nun, jim, and ya. But we said it's going to be made on the wazn sarfi of fa'ala. So because it has this weak letter in its root, we're going to put an alif in between them, because in this particular form here of fa'ala, right, it has an alif between the first and the second root letters. So we still have to do that. So we put a alif between the first and second root letters, so between the nun and the jim, and then we preserve, right, it doesn't have a lam as the last letter, it just has that weak vowel. So yunaji. Yunaji. Now, what did we say here about yunaji? Look at number 3. Who can read that footnote? فلانا. فلان, ما معنى فلان? So and so. Someone, right? So, ناجى فلانا. So في شدة الراء مشدود. So سره. سره. بما في قلبه من 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 أسرار أو مشاعر, right? وهذا فعل نعم وخصه بالحديث نعم, right. So ناجى فلانا سره بما في قلبه من إصرار أو مشاعر وخصه بالحديث. So what does this mean? Naja is like to naja someone. Okay, it means you're doing something with somebody, but then he explains sarrahu. What is a sir? Yeah, right? So the word secret in English or in Arabic, sir, هذا اسم, right? And as we know, almost all nouns go back to a verb. So while secret as a noun, sir, you can also like to confide in somebody or to tell somebody a secret is, now we have to say to tell somebody a secret in English. Whereas in Arabic, we actually have a verb called sarra. That means to tell somebody a secret or to confide in somebody. So, naja fulanan means what? Sarrahu bima fi qalbihi. It means that he what? He told somebody something very private, very secret that was what? Fi qalbihi. Something in his heart, right? Min asrar. From some secrets, from something very, very private, something very intimate. Aw masha'ir. What is sha'ar? Well, what is shi'r? What is shi'r? Poetry, right? Right? In Arabic, shi'r is poetry. What does poetry do to you? Well, let's change affect to effect. What does it effect? It impacts your emotions. Exactly. So this is why in Arabic, poetry is actually what? That which affects your emotions. So there's another word for specifically emotions. We have we have mash'ar and masha'ir. Masha'ir is just the plural, right? Right? So he's going to confide some secret in his heart from his deep, dark secrets. What min israrin aw masha'ir. Or from something very emotional and intimate. Right? وَخَصَّهُ خَص. What's khas? When something is like khas is specific. Yeah. So khas, that's the noun. But then as a verb, khassahu bil hadith. So it means to do engage. Khas can also mean private, right? Because you said it means what? Specific. So specific and private, right? It's not public. It's the very opposite. Specific means small. So to do it as a fi'l, as an act, khassa means, right, something private, something intimate, not declared out loud. But he did it, what? Khassahu bil hadith. Hadith here doesn't mean al-fadh min al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Hadith here means what? Qawl. Like qawl. Like you're saying it, but you're doing it on the down low, right? You're doing it privately, quietly. هذا هو المعنى ناجى. That's the meaning of ناجى, right? But عندنا الفعل في صيغة المضارع. We just are using it in the present tense, right? هذا الياء ياء زائد. This ya is added to the front because we now need to conjugate it in the present tense, and it needs to match our subject. Al-musalli, right? مذكر. So كذلك, right? الفعل في صيغة الذكر. So likewise, right? Our verb has to be masculine. So al-musalli يناجي ربه. ربه مفعول به. So what does this mean? The one that prays, keeping it all that about confiding secrets and intimacy and private, what are you doing when you pray? You are yunaji rabbak, right? So he's saying that, before we even get into tahara, let's just talk about what it really means to pray. To pray means to do something very intimate with Allah. And I don't want to be crass, but any form of intimacy, whether that is between a man and a wife, whether that is between uh, even a family member and another family member that is platonic in some way, like when you want to do an act of intimacy, do you want to be clean or dirty? Right? You want to be clean, right? And so he's saying, well, al-musalli yunaji rabbahu. You're going to do something very, very intimate. So now, from that point of view, نتحدث عن الموضوع الطهارة. Now, from that point of view, we will discuss purification. فعليه أن يتأهب لذلك بالوضوء أو بالطهر. So he says what? Therefore, it now becomes a requirement أن يتأهب. تأهب, we said, means what? Number 4. Yeah, so استعد, يعني استعد. Have you heard the term مستعد? Right? هل أنت مستعد للذهاب؟ أنا مستعد للصلاة. لست مستعدا للصلاة. Right? It's like, are you ready? Right? ¿Estás listo? Right? That's listo, see? Estamos listos. Okay. So the meaning of ta'ahaba means استعد. It means to get ready. So فعليه يعني فعل المصلي. Therefore now, when we say like عليك, to say, well, for instance, أنت مكلف, right? You're an adult. فعليك الواجبات من الإسلام. Now all the requirements of Islam are obligatory for you. Now we tend to say things like, wujub and wajib, but another way to say that is what? Alayk. It's on you now, right? Responsibilities, things you have to do, they're on your shoulders. So in Arabic, we also can say ala, fulan or ala shay. It's on you. So he says, فَعَلَيْهِ يعني فَعَلَى الْمُصَلِّ أَنْ يَتَأَهَّبَ لِذَلِكَ. So now that we understand that salah is an intimate act with your Lord, now it is compulsory. It's upon you that you have to get ready for it. وَلَكِنْ كَيْفْ بِالْوُضُوءِ, by making wudu. أو بالطهر. Look at number 5, the footnote. Here, طهر بمعنى, what does it say? يعني غسل. Right. So as we said before, sometimes, and again, this goes to synonyms. Not every single time when Ibn Abi Zayd wants to talk about the need to make ghusl, like for Jum'ah, for Friday prayer, or after spousal relations, he will not always use the word ghusl. Sometimes he will use the word tuhur to mean ghusl. But then other times he will use the word tuhur fil jumla, like just getting clean in general. So you have to know the context. Now, the context to know that it means ghusl and not the other in general is that he first mentions what? Bil wudu'i. Wudu is for what type of tahara? Major or minor? Minor. And so he's going to mention the minor first, and then bit-tuhri as the major, يعني al-ghusl. He says, in wajiba alayhi at-tuhr. And now he's telling you, how do you know that this tuhr means now ghusl? In wajiba alayh, if it is mandatory for him to make that purification. وَيَكُونُ ذَلِكَ بِمَاءٍ طَاهِرٍ. Now that has to be with ma'in tahir. That has to be with water that is pure. That tells us in and of itself, water has to be determined as to whether it is acceptable for tahara or not. Right? Some water can be used for ritual purification, some water cannot. ويكون ذلك بماء طاهر غير مشوب. مشوب بمعنى مشوب. Number 6, impurity. So mashub bi najasatin, right? So water that is free of any impurities. ولا ماء قد تغير لونه. So تغير, right? تغير تغير تغير. ما معنى هذا الفعل؟ Yeah, الياء مشدود, right? So تغير means what? No, غير means like without, but تغير means to change, right? So it is بني على الوزن تفعل والجذر غين ويا والراء, right? So that's the 3 root letters, غين يا را. But then we drop it into this particular morphological form, هذا الوزن الصرفي تفعل, and we get تغير. تغير. So ولا ماء ولا ماء قد تغير لونه. So لون, ما معنى لون؟ لون لام واو نون, وجمعه ألوان. المفرد والجمع. المفرد لون. ما معنى اللون؟ أحمر أبيض أسود أصفر أزرق. أبيض, ما هو أبيض؟ وأسود ما هو وما هو أسود؟ والأحمر ما هو أحمر؟ وأزرق ما هو أزرق؟ وأخضر ما هو أخضر؟ وما هذه؟ These are colors, right? So لون is color, ألوان colors. So he's saying, so he says ولا ماء قد تغير لونه لشيء خالطه. So it has to be water that has not changed its color with something that has what? خالطه. خالط. Just like we had this particular verb. Let's go back. Okay. Right, so we have, remember this form? فَعَلَ. And then under فَعَلَ, our first one that we had was noon plus jim plus ya, and that gave us na ja. Okay, fine. We did that one over there. We also have another one now that is going to be on this form. It's with kha and lam and ta. So we have kha, lam, and ta. Put it on this al-harf al-awwal, kha. Right? Al-harf al-tali, alif. Right? Al-harf al-thani in the form, right, in the root, Ayn, in this case, lam. And al-harf al-akhir is going to be ta. So naja, and we get khalata. Khalata. Right? That's also from the form of fa'ala. Khalata, or as a noun, khalta. What is that? Anybody ever heard of that one before? Yeah, to mix. To mix. So khalata bima'na to mix something up. So he's saying that ويكون ذلك بماء طاهر غير مشوب بنجاسة. So this has to be done with water that is pure, that has not been contaminated with impurities. ولا ماء قد تغير لونه. Nor can it be done with water that its color has changed. لشيء خالطه. With anything that mixed with it, that changed its color. Right? من شيء نجس أو طاهر. Whether the thing that mixed with it was najas or tahir. إلا ما غيرت لونه الأرض. Except that which غيرت. غيرت وتغير, basically the same meaning. Right? So there's a ya also on the shadda on the ya here as well. إلا, except ما غيرت لونه الأرض, except for that which the earth, right? The earth changed its color. التي هو بها من سبخ أو حمأ أو نحوهما. So whether you're talking about things like clay or salty deposits. So for instance, seawater. Seawater, if you go to the ocean, it's yani milhi. It has milh, right? It has salt in it. So obviously, salt water has a different rih, it has a different smell, and it also has a different taste. And it might even be a different color. But this is considered natural. So though it does have salt mixed in with it, what jaiz, it is acceptable to use to make wudu. Okay, Rob, turning the page. وَالْمَاءُ السَّمَاءِ. So, عين المفرد ما هو عين? So, عين can be many things. Ayn can be the eyeball. Ayn can also be, do I have any? No, I ain't got none. But let's just pretend I got some ducats in my pocket, right? Ayn can also be like cash, right? Or ayn can be, as you said, a spring or a fountain, which Allah talks about in Jannah, right? So, al-ayn huwa al-mufrad, wal-uyun huwa al-jama'. Right? So uyun is just the plural. So وماء السماء وماء العيون. نعم. Right. So وماء الآبار وماء البحر طيب طاهر مطهر. So let's, right. In Arabic, we have many words that will operate like this, right? So for instance, على الوزن فعل. This is like what we think of like the standard base conjugation for a verb. You take its root letters and you throw 3 fathas on top, and that's like your base conjugation. So if our three base letters are ta and ha and ra, we're going to get what? Right. No, not yet. Right? But then we also have this form. Looks exactly the same, except there's a shadda in the middle. So we have fa'ala, and then we have fa'ala. Fa'ala. Right? So like we have, for instance, alima, to know, and then allama. What does allama mean? Yes. Right. So you can think of it, alima means to know, allama means make somebody else know. Right? It means to make somebody else do the meaning of number one. So if you think about, like in the old English dictionaries, the early Arabic English dictionaries, they will call this form one and they will call this form two because they didn't really translate like fa'ala and fa'ala. They just said, okay, this is form one, form two. So in some ways, it's kind of helpful. Form two can either mean to make something or someone else do form one, or it can mean to intensify. So for instance, kabura. Kabura means what? Kabura with a dhamma for the second letter. Kabura means what? To be big, right? To be big. That's like when something is kabir, huwa qama ala al-fi'li kabura. But if we put it on this wazn, kabbara, what is that? No, that's istikbar. Right, istakbara. No, but kabbara, what do we do when we begin to pray? Allahu Akbar. So kabbara huwa alladhi yaqulu Allahu Akbar. Right? Or, azzama. It's like to, magnify or to extol, or it's like, madah. It's like, to say Allahu Akbar. Right? So what I'm saying is, this is to be big. This is to be even bigger. So you can have two ways that these kind of af'al, these kind of verbs that are made on fa'ala form, they're either going to make something else do its meaning of the first form, or it will intensify. Like kasara means to what? And kassara means what? To smash. And kathaba and kadhaba, it actually can be both. Kadhaba means to claim somebody else is a liar, but it's also an intensification because you're slandering somebody, right? So it's even like, and sometimes it's almost like a hybrid between the two, right? So we don't really use tahara very often, but what we do use is tahara. So if this is to be clean, what does this mean? To make something clean, right? Right? To make something clean. So we have now tahara, we have tathir. So if tahara is to make something pure, then you could say like tathir, which is an uncommon, it's not really a common usage, like purification. We're more used to tahara, right? But then more specifically, look at how it works. You take a meme, you put your root, ta, ha, ra. You keep this form with the shadda over the ha, right? And then we're going to be like this, mutahhir. So if tahara is to make something clean, the Mutahhir is the cleaner, because it's the thing that's doing it. It's the one or the object that does the cleaning, right? So it becomes ism fa'il. Now you can also have ism maf'ul. You could have mutahhar. So for instance, إذا حان الوقت للصلاة, if now is the time to prayer, وأنا أروح إلى المرحاض وأتوضأ, and I go to the bathroom, I make wudu. وبعد ذلك عندي طهارة. Now I have طهارة. أنا مطهر. I have been purified. So the mutahhir is the one that does the purification, and the thing that has been purified, huwa al-mutahhar. Right. So and you will find maybe in more of the kind of like Sufi writings, they will describe us as the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nahnu al-mutahharun bihidyatihi. We are the ones that are purified by His guidance. Because Allah Ta'ala said what? يَتْرُ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. Allah sent Him to recite the Quran to the people and to purify them. So we are al-mutahharun, inshaAllah. We are people that then have been purified by way of that. So mutahhir means a purifying agent, and a thing that possesses the capacity or the agency to clean. So when he says that, so he said, what? Ma'u sama'i, the water of what? The sky, rainwater, right? Rainwater, right? So he's talking about all of these different kinds of ones. So water from the sky. And then the Ma'al Uyun, water from wells or springs, right? And then al-abar, right? Water from abar, jami' bi'r. Have you ever heard of a bi'r? A well. So abar, jami' bi'r. So uyun is springs. Abar, wells. Bahar, we know what the bahar is, the ocean. They are all tayyibun. They are all tayyib. They are all pure. They are all tahir. They are all free of any impurities. And they are also considered to be mutahhir. They are purifying agents, meaning that they can be used for the process of purification. Not all water can be used for the process of purification. So he just listed like, if it changes its smell or its color, except for these, meaning that if it changes color and it doesn't fall into one of these categories, whether that change was by way of something, najas or tahir, it cannot be used. Now maybe you can use it to drink, because he said it could be tahir, right? It could be pure, or rather he said it could be tayyib. It could be pure. So maybe you use something to purify. You probably know, you as an infantry person, I know they make these tablets, right, that you can put in water to make it safe, right? And it will undoubtedly, change the characteristics of the water. Now, that'll make it safe for you to drink, but that's not for you to make wudu. That's what he means about you can purify water that's acceptable, say, for human consumption. But if it changes its color or its smell or its taste outside of these categories that are defined, then it is not considered to be mutahhir. It's not a ritually purifying agent. So you could not use it to make wudu, you could not use it to remove najasa from your clothes, nor could you use it to remove najas from the buq'ah, right, from the place where you're going to pray. So that's what he's saying here. So, وَمَاءُ السَّمَاءِ وَمَاءُ الْعُيُونِ وَمَاءُ الْآبَارِ وَمَاءُ الْبَحْرِ طَيِّبٌ طَاهِرٌ مُطَهِّرٌ لِلنَّجَاسَةِ. Okay, Reg. وَمَا غَيْرَ لَوْنِهِ طَاهِرٍ حَلَّ is a fi'l. حَلَّ طهر أو زوال نجاسة. وقليل الماء لم يتغيره. لم يتغيره. Okay, تمام. So he says what? That if the color has been changed, right? وما غير لونه بشيء طاهر حل فيه فلذلك الماء طاهر غير مطهر في وضوء أو طهر أو زوال نجاسة. So he says that what? That if the color of the water has been changed by something pure that has got into it, it remains pure, as we said, right? It remains pure, but it is not something that is going to be used for غير مطهر لوضوء. You cannot use it for wudu. أو طهر. يعني طهر كذلك غسل. You cannot use it for that. أو زوال نجاسة. زوال ما معنى زوال؟ إزالة يعني to remove. So again, you cannot use it to, it's not suitable for that task. Now maybe you could drink with it, you could cook with it, you could do some other things, but for ritual religious things, لا يجوز. You cannot do it. وما غيرته النجاسة فليس بطاهر ولا مطهر. And so he said, water that has been changed by something impure getting into it is not pure and cannot be used for purification purposes. He says, what? وَقَلِيلُ الْمَاءِ. And some small amount of impurity. يَنْجَسُهُ قَلِيلُ النَّجَاسَةِ. So a small amount of impurity makes a small amount of water impure. وَإِنْ لَمْ يَتَغَيَّرْهُ. Even if it's not apparent that it's changed. Now these are, I would say, quasi-vague. And so this is why, on one hand, like we're mainly reading this text to learn Arabic and to learn grammar, and not really learning it for fiqh. Because, and this is a thing, depending on the volume of water that you have, this will determine whether or not how much impurity can enter into it before it is now considered to be unacceptable, right? And that's a whole sub-chapter in and of itself that has to be studied, which he glosses over, right? Because this is like a kind of, this is like a introductory cursory, like, you know, Ibn Abi Zayd rahimahullah, he's like touching on everything. He's touching on aqidah, he's touching on iman, he's touching on fiqh, he's touching on tafsir, like all these things. But he doesn't go into any great detail, nor does he give the adillah, does he give the proofs for them. So I happen to give a little short quote here, just for the sake of it. And so let's read the section here in black and white, that's highlighted here in black. Go ahead. وتحصل الطهارة. الطهارة مش الطهارة، طاء حرف شمسي.
لنفسه المطهر لغيره الماء الباقي على أصل
خلقته. نعم.
أو المتغير
نعم.
بما لا ينفع لموضعه قراره.
نعم.
ومر ومروره كالمال
كالملح. ملح، ما شو ملح؟ ما معنى ملح؟ salt.
كالمل
ملحي.
ملح والمغيرة
والمغرة. مغرة is like algae.
مغرة. That might be a cognate in Spanish too, huh?
Yeah, right.
مغرة أو لتولده فيه كالتهلب تهلب ومنه الماء النازل من السماء وماء البحر ومياه الآبار
الآبار. So بئر, right? The جمع بئر. ومياه الآبار.
والعيون
والعيون والأنهار. Right. So he's saying that what? That purification is achieved. Hasala means to achieve. It can mean to arrive or to achieve at. So for instance, أنا حصلت على المطار. I've arrived at the airport. But you can also say, for instance, هو حصل على الشهادة من الجامعة. He graduated. He achieved his degree. Right. So hasala means to achieve or to acquire. So تحصل الطهارة. Purification is achieved بالماء الطاهر, by using water that is pure. في نفسه, in and of itself. المطهر لغير الماء الباقي على أصل خلقته. And so that it is pure in and of itself, and it is also purifying for other things. So when he says that after nafsihi, he says al-mutahiri li ghayrihi, that water is pure, but it is also a purifying agent, right? For things other than itself, li ghayrihi. Al-ma ul-baqi, right? That as long as it remains in its original form, baqi, right? To remain, right? على أصل خلقته. خلقة. So we know the word خلق, right, which means creation. So we have this root, قاف, lam, and قاف. As a verb, خلق, we know what this means, to create. Then from خلق we have its masdar خلق. خلق. So we have to create, creation. Then we have very similar, but with, instead of a sukoon, we have another dhamma, khuluq. Khuluq means like a characteristic. Of its plural, we've probably heard, right? Akhlaq. So akhlaq is the plural of khuluq. Then, likewise, somewhat related to this, if you want to talk about one characteristic, a khilqa. Khilqa. So a khilqa is a characteristic. So he's saying that al-ma'ul baqi, water that remains, ala asli khilqatihi. Water that remains is an original state. أو المتغير بما لا ينفك لموضوع قراره ومروره كالملح والمغرة. Or, right, so you have water that's just in its original state. Water coming from the sky, rain, water, water in a river, water in the ocean. These are water in their original state. Okay, tamam. Or they can be water that has been through some kind of change. They are mutaghayyir, right? They have been changed. But they've been changed in what way? بما لا ينفك. They cannot be nafak. They cannot be yani farq. They cannot be separated. Right? At least not easily. So for instance, salt water, it's two things. It's salt and water, as the name applies. But can you just readily, easily separate the salt and the water? Can you just reach in the water and take out the salt? Right? You can go through this crazy desalination process, right? Or you could even, naturally evaporate the water, right, into vapor, and what's left is the crystals. But you just can't reach in the water and pull out the water, or just reach in the water and remove the salt, right? So this is what he means by بما لا ينفق لموضع, as it is found. As it is found. قراره ومروره. Right, so whether that, however it's however you find it, whether that is something that is, as he says, qarar, as Allah Ta'ala says, you were mentioning the story of Adam alayhi salam in Surah Al-Baqarah, well, later on, after وَأَزَلَّهُمَا الشَّيْطَانِ, after shaitan tricks Adam alayhi salam and his wife, then Allah says, وَقُلْنَا اهْبِطُوا مِنْهَا, all of you now are expelled from paradise. وَلَكُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ مُسْتَقَرَّةٌ وَمَتَاعٌ إِلَى حِينٍ. Right? You're going to now have to be settled in the earth. You'll remain, meaning that you're not going to move. You're going to go to earth and you'll be there. So we're here and we can't get off till Elon builds his rockets. So we are here on earth. So qarar means to be settled, meaning it doesn't move, or marra or murur. Marra as a verb means what? To pass by, right? So something is stationary, and then you have something that marrahu, something that moves by it, meaning something that flows. So you can have water that is stationary, right? Still water or running water, right? So this is what he means here, al-Majaji, when he says what? That the characteristics of it are not easily separated. بِمَا لَا يَنْفَكُ لِمَوْضِعِ قَرَارِهِ وَمُرُورِهِ كَالْمِلْحِ, like salt water, أو al-mughra. Mughra here can also mean, some translate mughra, because this is kind of like an ambiguous term. It can mean things like algae in the water, which you can remove the algae, but sometimes they leave a stain. Or it can also refer to things like clay or ochre that's in the water that kind of casts a dye, but it's still considered tabi'i, it's still considered natural. So these things, even though this kind of water is mutaghayyir, but huwa jaiz lil wudu, lil tahara. It is something that is acceptable. أو لتولده فيه قد تحلب, or it is due to something that naturally develops in it, قد تحلب. So tawallada, meaning like it's something that tasawwara, it's something that naturally develops in it. Tuhlab, again, here could mean like some like kelp or algae or something that grows therein. ومنه الماء النازل من السماء. نازل. أنزل الله من السماء ماء. So نازل, right? Rain that comes down. من السماء. وماء البحر. ومياه. ما معنى مياه؟ مياه جمع ماء. Right? So ma is the mufrad, is the singular, and miyah is the plural. ومياه Al-Abar, water or waters that come from what? Wells. Wal-Uyun. Wal-Anhar, rivers. تمام. Okay, Reg. فَإِذَا خَلَطَهُ
من خير ما سبق وخير أصل هلقته في اللحم أو طعام
أو طعم ريح. نعم.
فقد
فقد. Yeah, so faqad is like and then, but faqada means to lose. Tahuriya. فصار حكمه ويكره
تطهر بماء استحمل في طهارة سابقة من وضوء أو غسل وبيسير
حلت
في نجاسة لم تحرير والبمس ما ومسمس وما لقى في قلب إذا كان يسيرا عرفا ويكره واتصل في ماء
الراكد. Right. So he says فإذا خالطه شيء من غير ما سبق. So what did we say the verb خالط means? To mix. So فإذا خالطه شيء من غير ما سبق. So if something other than what was previously mentioned, like all the stuff we've already talked about, if that mixes with it, right? فغير أصل خلقته. Therefore, the very essence of it then, it changes. Its nature, right? فغير. It's going to change. And that will change in where? في لون, in its color. أو في طعم. Yes. Right. So ta'am is food and ta'am is taste. أو ريح. It's smell. تمام. فقد, again, فقد means to lose. Like مثلا أنا فقدت مفاتيحي. I lost my keys. Right? So فقد صفتا, that's why صفتا and not صفatu, because it's what is being lost. Right? صفتا الطهورية. It loses its characteristic of being a purifying agent. طهورية. وصار حكمه, and therefore its hukum, its ruling becomes ka hukmi mughayyiri. It becomes like what is, or rather, its ruling becomes like the ruling of what altered it. So if the thing that altered it, we have to know what then its ruling is. Is it permissible, not permissible? Is it clean, not clean, so on and so forth. Then he says, yukrahu التطهر بماء استعمل في طهارة سابقة. It is makruh. It is disliked. Not haram, but it is disliked. What? التطهر. To make purification. يعني wudu أو الغسل or anything like that. بماء. With water that is what? استعمل. عمل means what? Yeah, to do. Ista'mala means to like employ or to use a thing, right? So amila is to do, and ista'mala is to do or to put something to use or to utilize. But now we're in the majhul voice. It's in the passive. So it's not ista'mala. He says what? Bima'in istu'amila. That has been used. Right? So the water has already been used before for what? Tahara. It is disliked to then use that same water again. Fi taharatin sabiqa. Don't use old water that you use for wudu to make wudu again. In that it's what? It's makruh. Now if you don't have a choice, then that's different. But it is something that is disliked. Min wudu'in aw ghuslin, like for either of those. And he says, وَبِيَسِيرٍ حَلَّتْ فِيهِ نَجَاسَةً. And that it's disliked to do that, and then for either that or for wudu. But he says, with a small amount of water, which is if some impurity again has fallen in it, lam تغيره. So let's say you're making wudu and you have a big thing of water, and some small amount of thing that's considered an impurity enters into it. Then he's going to say, this is okay, right? It's still plural. As he says, lam yataghayyirhu. It has not changed it. وبالمشمس, right? And therefore now as it deals with things that have been, what do you think mushammasi is? Take away the meme in mushammas, and what do you get? Shams. What's shams? The sun. So what is something that is mushammas? Yeah. Solar powered. or in this case, like it's been affected by the rays of the sun. It's been heated and kind of left stagnant out in the open. So he says, وَبِالْمُشَمَّسِ وَمَا وَلَغَ فِيهِ الْكَلْبُ. وَلَغَ? What is وَلَغَ? وَلَغَ. Well, so if you know it involves a dog, what does a dog do? Slobber. Right, yani shari, but also because dogs don't just simply sip their water, right? Right? They get in there and go bananas, right? So whether you're dealing with water that has been stagnant in the sun, أو ما ولغ فيه الكلب, or a dog that is kind of slobbered in it, إذا كان يسيرا غرفا عرفا. If it is just a little amount, then essentially this is up to custom. Meaning that some people are not accustomed to dogs. There are some cultures that are not accustomed to dogs. And so if you're not really accustomed to like messing around and sharing space with a dog, even if it's a little bit, then you can say, no, throw that water out. We can't use that for wudu. If you're people, and this could be by qawm, or be shakhas, or this could be like by people and cultures. This could even be by profession. So we can enter ra'in or anta fallahi. You're a shepherd or you're a farmer and you have a dog and you're always working with your cattle dog, right? In that case, he says that is what? Urfan. Because it all begins with what? Yakruhu. Or yukrahu. It all begins with it's disliked, it's makruh. The reason why, you might say, wait a minute, the dog is najis. No. For the Malikis, because both Ibn Abi Zayd and Imam al-Majjaji, they are both from the Maliki school. For the Malikis, the dog is what? Tahir. The dog is 100% pure. So neither its saliva or anything else is considered najis. So for the Malikis, it's not an issue, but it's kind of like disgusting if the dog gets in there and slobbers. And so he's saying it's disliked to do it because what? The very first thing that we began with, al-musalli yunaji rabbahu, right? The very first thing is that what? The musalli, the person praying, they are the one that are in an intimate act with their Lord. So that's why it's makruh, meaning that, okay, maybe it's an inconvenience. You got to take off your work clothes, or you got to go find another source of water, or whatever that it is. Yes, it's an inconvenience, but you're doing an act of intimacy. So in that case, we know that when it comes to the makruh, though we're not punished if we do it, we do get reward if we expend the effort to achieve it. Right? So if you do it, you get the effort. And so he says here, now, depending on the culture, the custom, and so on, then it said, وَيُكْرَهُ الْإِقْتِسَالِ فِي الْمَاءِ الرَّاكِدِ. And that it's also likewise generally to say use like stagnant pond water, like water that is rakid, water that doesn't really move, right? It's not haram, but it's not the preferable, right? And it's rewardable, it's commendable that if you do it with the intention, right? I intend to not use this water because I understand the hukm, I understand the ruling, and I will seek out other water to do it. And I understand that this is makruh, so inshallah I'll get the ajr, I will get the reward from doing it, right? That's kind of the implication there. Okay, Rab, وَقِلَّةُ الْمَاءِ وَقِلَّةُ الْمَاءِ
الغسل سنة وصرف منه غلو وبدت وقد توضأ رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم
Mud. Right, so mud, we'll see here in a minute now. Did I put yes, number 8. What does it say about number 8? Mud.
approximately 0.75 liters.
Right, so mud is a unit of measurement. This is a unit of measurement that was described by the Prophet ﷺ and the companions at their time. So the Prophet ﷺ did wudu muddin bimud. He did it like in units of measurement that we will call a mud. So قلة الماء مع إحكام الغسل سنة. So using a little bit of قلة. What ما معنى قلة? قليل. You know the word قليل, right? So qalil is an adjective. Qilla is a noun. And if you remember before, we had the word buq'a and qat'a. Are you seeing a pattern? There's all these words that have a little ta'un marbuta on the end. So you could take like a thing that has a verbal meaning and stick that ta marbuta on the end, and then you get like a little thing out of it, or an individual version of it. Yeah. It can either be diminutive or just a single item of it. So for instance, you have bakar and bakara. Bakar, cows. But bakara is a specific cow, right? It doesn't mean like a little teeny cow, but it just means like it's a specific one cow out of the cows. Shajar, shajara, right? Like a tree out of all the trees. So qalil, something that is small. But qilla is like a small amount of something, right? So qillatul ma'i, small water. Ma'a ihkam al-ghusl, with the what? With the understanding of the ruling of wudu, right? Using a small in the execution, the ihkam, in the execution of making ghusl, sunnah. It is sunnah. By here, he means it as the mustalahah, fiqhi. He means it here as a technical fiqh term, sunnah. Was saraf, right? And so what? The going to extremes like israf. Allah Ta'ala says, "Kulu washrabu wa la tashrafu." Like, eat and drink, but don't go to what? Extremes. So saraf means extreme. So was saraf minhu, meaning like the very opposite, to use kathratul ma, to use a ton of water, is he describes as ghuluwun wa bid'atun. Ghulu. What is ghulu? something like extreme. And bid'ah, we know bid'ah, meaning that it's not just an innovation, meaning it's something that is against the way of the Prophet ﷺ, that is not sanctioned by the religion. So, particularly when there are clear instructions not to do so. So the Prophet ﷺ left very clear instructions of how to do tahara. Tayammum, ghusl, wudu. He left very clear instructions of how to do that. And in the execution of it, in the ihkam of it, not what to use, what qillatul ma, to use a little bit. So anybody that does saraf in this, that goes to the extreme, they are now a person of ghulu and bid'ah. So he's making a very heavy statement. وَقَدْ تَوَضَّأَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ, and the Prophet made wudu bimuddin. He made it by using a measurement of water known as the mud. And we described that in the footnotes there. وَهُوَ وَزْنُ الرَّطَلِ. I've also put some notes there. What is number 9? The ratal. It says what? Historically, a ratal ranged from about 300 grams anywhere to perhaps a kilogram. So for instance, in Iraq, at one point in time, they understood the ratal to be what? 130 dirahim. 130 dirhams. And their dirham in Iraq weighed about 2.975 grams. So one ratal was equal to roughly 386 grams. But in Egypt, however, it sometimes went all the way up to like 449 or even more. So it wasn't entirely consistent across the Muslim world, but nonetheless, this term did exist and it was taken from the Sunnah. وَهُوَ وَزْنُ رَطْلٍ وَثُلُثٍ. So it was, what is the mud? It is considered a ratal and a third. وَثُلُث, right? Thuluth meaning a third. وَطَهَّرَ بِصَارٍ, and that he made tahara, because tahara means to purify, and he did purification, bi sa'in. Sa'in, a sa' is also a unit of measurement, so one sa' is roughly equal to about, by volume, 3 liters, or by weight, approximately 3 kilograms. وهو 4 أمداد بمده عليه الصلاة والسلام. And so that is considered to be 4 mud by the mud of the Prophet, and may Allah Ta'ala bless him. وطهارة البقعة للصلاة واجبة. Purifying also the place where prayer will take place, or ensuring that it is, free of impurities, is wajib. وكذلك طهارة الثوب. Likewise, ensuring that the clothes are clean. وقيل إن ذلك فيهما واجب وجوب الفرائض. Right? It has also been said that regarding the both of those, that this is akin to the necessity of doing the fara'id. وقيل, and it has also been mentioned, but meaning it's not the stronger opinion, wujub as-sunan al-mu'akkada, that it is considered from the sunnah mu'akkada, the emphasized sunnah. وَيُنْهَى. So I have a little thing I put together about how to differentiate between al-ma'lum wal-majhul, خاصة في المضارع. So I have a little quick handout that I'll give you that deals with how do you differentiate between the active and the passive voice in the present tense, right? And so one of the simple signs is that you can tell that it's going to be passive is that the subject is not explicitly mentioned. So it begins, if let's say it was active, it would say وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الصَّلَاةِ. It would mean that he or it prohibits the prayer. فِي مَعَاطِنِ الْإِبِلِ, in the places where the camels rest. But who is the fa'il of naha? Who is not mentioned? It's not the Prophet ﷺ, even though we can say that that is the source, but from the sentence, no, we're not directly talking about the Prophet ﷺ. So it is going to be yunha, yunha, instead of yanhi, yunha. Yunha means it has been prohibited, right? Or it is prohibited, because it's a combination of like kind of almost like a past tense feeling, but you're discussing it in the present tense. So it has been prohibited. An salati fi ma'atin. Ma'atin, amakin, yani makan, like the place, right? Ma'atin al-ibl. And I put a little, ibl is the camel. And ma'atin, I put a note number 11, right? Like where they come to rest or place, right? So generally, it's prohibited to go because it's not clean. Wa mahajjat al-tariq. What's mahajja? Mahajja with a fatha. Mahajja. So take away the meme and the ta'ul marbuta, and what are you left with? Hajj, right? So mahajja al-tariq. What's a tariq? Right. So the path for, yeah, like if you've ever been, I don't know, have either of you ever been to Hajj, right, or Umrah? So anyway, as you know, like there's a specific place you have to go. Well, if you've got literally thousands or millions of people all coming down the road to go to Mina or go to the Haram or whatever, to Arafah, you can't be like, okay, Allahu Akbar. You can't just stop in the middle of the road and start making salah. So, wa yunha, right? Mahajjat tariq, right? So you can't just stand in the middle of the road where people are making hajj and start making prayer. Wa dhuhri, Bayt Allah al-Haram. You can't get on top of the Kaaba and start making salah either. Wal-Hammam, right? Nor should you do it in the Hammam. حيث لا يوقن منه بالطهارة. What's yuqinu? I put a little note there. So yuqinu. Yuqinu. But we have another word. Yes. Right. So to be, it's again, is going to be a passive voice. So it is related to the word yaqeen. Yaqeen means to be what? Certain. Here it says la yuqinu or la yuqanu, right? It is not certain. So what? You cannot go into the hammam haythu aw yani aynama, where la yuqanu minhu bit-tahara. It's uncertain about its state of purification, because that's where go people to relieve themselves, and there's usually the involvement of different types of najasat, right? So he's saying that it's because it's uncertain. La yuqanu minhu, right? To be yaqeen, like huwa yaqeen, right? Like a person can be yaqeen, right? So yaqinu. But here yuqanu, we said what? It's the passive voice, because who is being certain is not explicitly mentioned. When you are not have the subject who is being certain, then you are referring to it. That's why we call it majhul. Like you don't know. You're ignorant of who specifically we're talking about, but we're not ignorant about the act. The act is to be certain. So he said, no, la yuqanu minhu. It is uncertain as to whether it is what? Bit-tahara, whether it has, whether it's pure or not. Wal mazbala, right? And he describes the mazbala as, did I put that down here? Yes, like a garbage dump, a garbage heap. The mazbala and the majazara. What is do you know jazar? Do you know dhabah? Dhabiha? Dhabah is to slaughter. Jazar kadhalika dhabah. So jazar means to also slaughter. So the jazar is a butcher, And the majzara is like a butcher house, like a slaughterhouse. So that's also really not a place that you want to pray in. وَمَقْبَرَةُ الْمُشْرِكِينَ it's been prohibited to put the grave in the graveyards of the people who are not of Islam. وَكَنَائِسِهِمْ. This is interesting. What's a kanisa? Right, so kana'is is just plural. So this is interesting. A lot of Muslims now have bought old churches. The important thing is, and I'm not saying you can't, they need to be first converted into a masjid, meaning they have to be re-intentioned to be that. So there are some places where Muslims will rent a church and they will go to pray in it. And al-Malikiyah, actually not just the Malikiyah, but specifically because we're dealing with two Maliki scholars, and al-Malikiyah la yajuz. You can't do this. But hey, it's just fiqh. Okay. وأقل ما يصلي فيه الرجل من اللباس ثوب ساتر من درع. So أقل. So we have قليل, we have قلة, and then أقل. What's أقل? So we have this form. We have the أفعل form. So we might be familiar with like أكثر, أكبر. What does أكثر or أكبر mean?
The biggest or the most.
Not the biggest or greater than, right? So it's not al-akbar, but just akbar, right? So the way that, because again in the word qalil, we have 3 root letters, but 2 of them repeat. So this will often be represented in many of its nouns by just putting a shadda on the lam, right? In the sifa we say qalil, so we do use both. But like qilla, we say, right, we put the shadda. Likewise, to make the af'al form, right, aqallu. So the least, right? So like أقل ما يصلي فيه الرجل. So the least amount that a man can pray in terms of clothes is a thob, thobun satirun, is a thong that what? What does satara as a verb mean? To cover. So the least amount is that it covers min dar, like if you wear a dir, rather. Dir, in English we have a word, well, it's actually, I think it's like an old Germanic word called a hauberk. Anybody here like an old, like, I don't know, Renaissance nerd, right? So a hauberk is like a piece of clothing that will cover roughly from here down to about here, right? So an old piece of like chainmail or leather jerkin, particularly in Europe, they used to wear called a hauberk. And that's what it was. It would cover like your neck and your shoulders, your chest, all the way down to a little bit below the knees. Yeah, exactly. You got your center mass covered, right? So that's what a dir is, right? That covers those areas. Aw, he says, rida, or like a big long cloak that again will cover all of those. Wa dir'ul qamis, or like a kind of long shirt, right? ويكره أن يصلي بثوب ليس على أكتافه. It is makruh, not haram, but disliked for one to pray in a piece of clothing. لَيْسَ عَلَى أَكْتَافِهِ. Right? أَكْتَاف. And that's supposed to be a ta, not kanaf. That's supposed to be kataf. Right? Your shoulders. Min shay'in. So it's disliked to pray in a garment that doesn't cover your shoulders completely. But he says, فَإِن فَعَلَ لَمْ يَعُدْ. However, if that happens, you don't repeat the prayer. وَأَقَلُّ مَا يُجْزِئُ الْمَرْأَةُ مِنَ اللِّبَاسِ في الصلاة الدرع الخصيف السابغ. So now he's talking about the least amount that's acceptable for a woman to pray in is going to be likewise a long shirt, but is also sabigh. Sabigh is going to be what? يعني طويل أو كامل. It's going to be, here the word khasif. Now normally the word khasif with a sod, khasif normally refers to something that's kind of like the color of ash. But also it's the color of a kind of woven material that some Arab cultures used to weave with, and that weaving was thick. So the general meaning here is that a woman should wear a garment that is long, covers her aura, is thick enough to not reveal the finer points of her form, and it should be long so that it covers her well. الذي يستر ظهور قدميها, and it should cover the what is apparent, or the tops of her feet. The dhuhur, or what is, what do you see when a person is standing in prayer? Is dhuhur, the outward part of her foot. وخمار تتنفع به, and then also her khimar that is going to cover her head. وتباشر بكفيها الأرض في السجود مثل الرجل, and that when she goes into sujud, she puts her palms on the floor in the same way, in the same manner as a man. So I have like I said, I have a little short summary, like a 1 or 2 page little handout with a few example sentences that will show you. I'll send it out, whatever, I'll put it up on the Substack or whatever, you can look at it. But it will just give you a very simple overview, like how do I know when something is the active or the passive voice? If you're beginning the sentence with a verb and it doesn't mention explicitly, who the subject is, then 9 times out of 10, it's actually going to be majhul. It's going to be in the passive voice, even if it is present tense, because the fa'al is not dhahir. It's not explicitly mentioned, right? ليس الفاعل مذكور, right? The subject is not mentioned. So I'll put that up for you to review as well, and then you can let me know if you have any questions. Anything else thus far? Good. So, alhamdulillah. وربنا زدنا علما إن شاء الله. لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. والصلوات الله تعالى على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. الحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم.